So just a little note, thank you to everybody who's come back to talk with our students, and we'll open it up for students from Wootton to ask questions of our panelists tonight. So would each of you introduce yourselves, maybe talk a little bit about your school and your majors, and maybe that'll help center everyone, and we might make a connection there. So Dylan, since do you want to get us kicked off tonight?
Sure, sounds like a plan. So hello everyone, my name is Dylan Safai. I graduated last year from Wootton High School, proud alumni, and I currently attend Williams College, and I'm studying psychology on the pre-med track, and it's all in all been a lot of fun. Williams College is a small liberal arts college up in the Berkshires in Massachusetts, so our population is actually smaller than Wootton High School. So that's been an adjustment. So for a lot of students, it's a larger school than their high school, but for myself, it's smaller. Classes are very small. You know, some classes are just 2 students. My largest class is 9 students. So that's an adjustment in and of itself. So if you guys have any questions on the liberal arts experience, what it's like living in a rural town or living in the middle of nowhere, feel free to ask me.
Hello, my name is Charlotte. I graduated last year too. I go to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. So if you have any questions on big city experiences, I can answer that in contrast to Dylan's. It's also an art school. So that's a really big adjustment from going from like a basic high school curriculum to the way that they approach learning in like an art school environment. And yeah, it's a pretty small school, bigger than Wootton though, but I think the biggest thing is the city. I can answer questions on that because it is very different.
Adding on to Charlotte, I'm Carrie. I go to Georgetown University. It's also a school in the city. DC is really close by, but our size is like about 1,700 in a grade. I currently studying foreign service in the SFS, which is the School of Foreign Service. And I think I'm also going to be a business major. So if anyone's interested in that, I can answer any questions. And yeah.
I forgot to say I'm an architecture major. So, and I know a lot about the other majors at Pratt, like film, photography, painting. So I can answer anything like that.
All right, panelists, thank you so much for your introductions and letting us know what wonderful schools you attend. So students, I turn it over to you. Any questions about either the different experiences, the different kind of schools that we have represented here? Any questions about those majors, or what would you like to ask our panelists tonight? Also, I'll monitor the chat if you want to put any questions in there as well.
I have a question for Carrie. It's Hope, by the way. Hi, Carrie. How would you say, how difficult or what was the transition like? Like, did Wootton prepare you well?
I was surprised by the transition into college because I assumed that, and I'll just be completely honest, I feel like I assumed that college would be the same amount of difficulty as high school, but for me it was so much harder. And I think that's because I went from like junior year online to just having like a really major case of senioritis, because I did get into Georgetown super early and then I lost a lot of motivation second semester. So going to college and having like so many classes, so much work, I was working probably like 5 to 6, I was doing like 5 to 6 hours of work a day in college. It was just something that I wasn't used to. But I think it's also because the atmosphere at Georgetown is really competitive, even compared to Wootton. But it was manageable once I like set time aside in my calendar. And I think it's more of like, I wasn't used to the way that I was doing work at Wootton with the transition over to college.
Thank you, Carrie.
Does anyone have any questions about like the college application process? Because I know that's something that I had a lot of questions about when I was applying to colleges, and like me, Dylan, Charlotte, we have like a ton of experience with that.
Yes, I'm a parent of a sophomore. So I would love to hear about your experience at that. And especially, I think you said you were majoring in business, and my son's interested in going that route as well.
Yeah, I can start. And then I'm sure Dylan and Charlotte also have a lot to add. But for me, the most important part about college applications is knowing like how competitive the process is. In college, I've realized it's the same areas of it's the same areas feeding into like all the top schools. It's like the DMV, it's like the Bay Area, it's like Texas, it's New Jersey, and our areas are so overly competitive compared to like the rural states. And like especially like when I tell people I'm from Bethesda, like everyone's heard of like Woon, Whitman, Bethesda, North Bethesda. So I think like just coming from this area, it's already more competitive than coming from other areas, and that's something to keep in mind. The thing that helped me out most with college applications is this tip that I read in a book once. It's that every sentence of your application should be especially your essays too, should be something like very unique to yourself. Like if you're writing a sentence in your essay and you can imagine someone else writing the same exact sentence, then it's probably not unique enough to you to really stand out, because your application should stand out a lot. But if your son's still a sophomore, I think he doesn't really need to worry about essays or anything like that yet. Maybe it's more about like focusing on his grades and what he wants his major to be, and what extracurriculars would like help him would help be beneficial towards his major, and like focusing in and like honing in on those activities that will like that he'll be able to talk about in his application.
So the main thing that I would suggest, especially as a sophomore, is that looking into the colleges and visiting colleges. So I know during our years, it was very difficult to visit colleges because COVID had just hit. So a lot of the colleges were offering online tours. So that was really the only way to visit the schools. So that's a great way to get started, start visiting some schools. My biggest recommendation is visiting one rural school, one somewhat suburban school, and then one school in the city. So you get at least a gist of what each of them are like. I'd never visited a rural school before going to Williams, so I didn't know too much of what to expect, but I've really loved it living out in the woods, and there's so much to do living in a rural setting. And as Carrie mentioned, a lot of my classmates are either from the DMV, are from New York private schools, are from Connecticut, or the Bay Area. These seem to be the main areas that feed into a lot of these top schools in the United States. And then in relation to applying to schools, I didn't know, but there's a lot of organizations out there like Matriculate, for example. So I'm a Matriculate advisor this year. So I'm going to be helping out students that are applying next year. And these organizations like Matriculate, for free, they match student tutors to students to help them get into colleges.
I would say for me, I didn't know like the vibe of the school that I wanted to go to going into it. So applying to like a wide range of schools was really important for me. Like I had Maryland for my like state school, and then I knew I wanted to be in a city pretty well. So I applied to mainly city schools, but again, I didn't think I was going to end up going to an art school. But as I got closer to the end of the process, I realized that that's what I wanted. So I think like that time period from when you're applying to schools, which can be like the summer going into your senior year, to when you're deciding in like May, like a lot can change over that period of time. So like making sure that you're not locked into one idea of what you want and kind of like leaving it a little open-minded, while also not, I mean, I didn't apply to very many schools. I know people that have applied to like over 20 and stuff, which there's nothing wrong with, but trying to like make that list is really hard because you also don't want to spend a ton of time. It's hard to do like 25 different applications. It's really time consuming. So I think creating that list was the hardest part for me. And you just kind of have to balance like having a wide range of things and also knowing what you want. I think it's really easy if you know what major you want to go into to look at those lists of just best colleges for your major and picking like 5 off of that list, and then picking a few that are like where location wise you want to be. And then a few that are like, if you know that you want a state school with like tailgates and stuff like that. And also everyone says this, but starting early, because it really sucks to be working on college applications, but also trying to balance all your like senior year schoolwork and activities. So as much as you can get done over the summer, that's really important.
I would also add that for business, a lot of schools don't have an undergrad business school. Like I know Northwestern and UCLA are two like amazing schools that just don't provide any business for undergrad, or if it's business, it's just a major, it's not a business school. So that's definitely something to consider if you're looking to go into like the business path.
All right, panelists, let's try this one on for size. Oh, here's one. Yeah, Jessica, this is so interesting. This was the question I was just going to ask. So, what surprised you most about your first month at college? That's literally what was on my mind too.
I can start. I feel like Carrie touched on this a little bit, but like the workload, because, you know, you see college students and, you know, they're spending their whole weekends with friends or like going to football games and stuff. But like there were Saturdays and Sundays, like I just had to set aside completely from like 9 to like a.m. to when I was sleeping, where like I would just take breaks to eat and I was working the whole time. And it's definitely different at every school, but like, you know, it's not all like fun. It's really a lot of hard work. So that was one thing that surprised me a lot. Yeah, I would say that was my biggest surprise.
Yeah, I'd say my biggest surprise was definitely the workload in terms of the English classes. So at Wootton, we didn't really have to write too many essays, you know, maybe an essay a quarter or something of the sorts. And when you get to college, at least Williams College, man, it's essay after essay, week after week. And it's not these short 2-page, 3-page double space essays anymore. These teachers want 2,000, 3,000 words. And so I think that's the one area that I was definitely most surprised about. Something else was, you know, I was expecting to get homesick, but I didn't get homesick at all. I think, you know, FaceTime and Zoom are great options to stay in contact with your family. So if you're ever worried about getting homesick, don't be. You'll still be in contact.
I definitely relate to Dylan about the workload for writing, but also Dylan and I go to we both have like liberal-ish majors at liberal schools, so we do a lot of writing. I took a writing class, and it was my first time just writing like 10-page papers. And that's something that some of my classmates have done at their like private schools or boarding school high schools, but at Woon, like that's I think like we had like one class AP seminar where you did something like that. Like most classes didn't prepare you for that amount of writing. So that was something that I found like a little bit difficult, but I think college like really like brought out better writing skills for me.
Thank you all panelists. Here's the next question. This one might be in Dylan's court. Can you speak to D3 schools, Williams especially?
Sure. So I think the D3 schools are amazing, especially Williams College. You know, I don't want to brag, but we have won the Directors Cup. I think it's 24 out of the last 26 years for D3 schools. So we're a very good D3 school. So if you're looking at D3 sports, we're the way to go. We're actually the biggest little game in America, something of the sort for our football game. We have tons of people come on down for our Williams Amherst matchup. But in specific, I think that a lot of students, especially since it's a smaller school, participate in sports. And so you see a lot of students that are able to manage both their workload and their sports at the same time. And I'd say D3 is a great way to go because you're still competing in the sport, you're still competing against other schools, but it's not as much time commitment as a D1 school in relation to dedication to the sport. So you're still enjoying the sport while at the same time you get a chance to focus on your classwork. And then the good thing about Williams is that a lot of the teams you can walk onto or you can try out for once you get there. Like I'd never sailed before, but I got to Williams and then there was this open tryout for the sailing team. I went and now I'm on the sailing team. So I'm an athlete, college athlete, even though I never intended to be one. So that's a great thing about going to a small school like Williams.
Charlotte and Carrie, anything you would like to add on?
Yeah, I can't say I go to a necessarily sporty school, but we are the only art school in the NCAA. So I have a friend on volleyball and a friend on basketball and a friend on track and stuff. And again, it is like I have my friends that play volleyball, they were recruited ahead of time, but all my other friends just walked onto the teams. And I think it's a really good way to kind of have that team environment and like another group of friends and a way to make friends. While also in D3, and especially in my school, it's pretty easy to balance it with your other things. And I know I have some friends that play sports at other schools, and it's just like really overwhelming and kind of takes over your college experience. So I agree that I think if you're wanting to play sport, but you also kind of want to get a lot of other things out of college, that D3 is a really good way to go.
I can't really speak to it because Georgetown's a D1 school, but I can start by answering the next question.
Good. Thank you, Carrie. I didn't know if you all could see it. Do you want to read that one aloud?
Yes. CW asked questions about application strategy. Do you recommend single choice, early action, or early decision, or regular decision? And oh, hi, Ruth. Is this Ruth Dye? Maybe it is. Hi, Ruth. Anyways, I had a lot of trouble deciding if I wanted to ED or EA anywhere. Early decision is binding, which means once you apply for a school and you get an early decision, you have to go there and you can't hear back from any other schools, and you have to pay the full tuition there too. So I think a lot of people struggle with whether or not to pick an ED school. For Georgetown and a lot of other schools, there's something called restricted early action, which means you can only apply to one school earlier, and it supposedly increases your chances of getting in because the acceptance rate is higher, but it's not binding, which means you don't have to go there after you get in. And I kind of recommend not EDing anywhere because it kind of does tie you down to the school if you get in, unless you have a dream school that you're like very, very set on going to. Like if you know that this is the school for you and you know that you would go there no matter what, and your family has like the finances to pay for it, then I would recommend EDing because it does increase your chances. But otherwise, I think it's best to wait to EA or to regular decision just to keep your options more open.
Yeah, I would say I applied early action to pretty much all my schools, and there's like no harm in not applying early action. It's a good way also if you're following the early action deadline, then you're going to get your applications done before. So I would recommend doing early action anywhere that offers it. I don't know if there's a huge difference between acceptance rate of early action and regular decision, but I would say to do early action. And the same thing with early decision. I knew I didn't want to do early decision just because I didn't really have a dream school and the finances and everything. But I would say the same thing, Carrie. If you have a dream school, then it's a really good way to like, it increases your chances by so much. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely recommend looking into the application deadlines because some of them, like UMD, you have to apply early action if you want to get into their honors or scholars programs or likewise. So I definitely say be on the lookout for those. Some colleges are like that. So applying early action won't affect you can apply to as many schools as you want early action. But if you do early decision, then you can only do one specific school for the early decision. So it's like you're putting all your eggs into one basket. I ended up early decisioning. I did Columbia University. I didn't get in, but you could do your ED if you wanted to. And then the one that Carrie was talking about, the REA, there's only a certain number of schools that you're able to REA to. But if you do REA, then you can't EA, early action, to any other private schools. So these are definitely little things here and there to look into. But like Charlotte said, try to get your applications done as soon as possible before your senior year begins so that, you could focus on your senior year, be with your friends, be able to participate in those early senior year events without having to sit down on the weekends and the weekdays and grind out those essays.
Can I ask a follow-up question to Dylan? Because Columbia is a far cry from Williams, right? In terms of like the geographic nature of it and the size of the school. How did you end up at Williams, and was that did that decision surprise you?
So I didn't know much about Williams prior to applying, and so I applied, I got in, and then I went and visited a lot of the schools that I got into. And when I was visiting Williams, I really fell in love with the campus. A couple of the unique things that I especially liked about Williams that I know no other school offers is that Williams is the only American school with land at Oxford. So Williams has this special Exeter program that your junior year, you're able to study at Oxford College, and you get an Oxford degree as well at the Exeter College. And I think that's very unique, and it should be a lot of fun. Something else Williams has is that their orientations are very different from all other schools. Our orientation programs are unique in the sense that some of them, they'll send you in the woods for a week and a half with another group of students. And I just thought that was quite amazing. And we also have these things called tutorial classes. So there are only 2 students per class. I'm currently in 2 of those tutorials. You get great exposure with the professor, and you actually learn the subject, because if you don't do the readings, if you don't study before the class, then you essentially will not be able to pass these one-on-one conversations that you're going to be having. So I think those are the main things that drew me in, as well as the scenery. The Berkshires are quite amazing when I visited.
I just realized that me, Dylan, and Charlotte, we all go to like smaller schools, like schools where we have classes with probably like I have classes with like 10 to 15 kids. Like I know at like University of Maryland, at like UCLA, UMich, like most of their classes are with like 300 kids, or with like lectures, like recitations. Like your TAs are going to be teaching the class. That's like very common for state schools. Like there's nothing like what Dylan's talking about, like the 2-on-1 like with the professor. And that's like I'm not sure like if Charlotte has anything like that, but that's something that's like very unique to like private like liberal smaller schools.
Yeah, the way we do classes at Pratt in the architecture school is like every single student in your year of architecture has like lectures together. So most of our classes are laid out like an hour to 2 hours of lecture, and then an hour to 2 hours to 3 hours of studio. So it's like my studio is 15 people, and we have every single class together. We have our desks in the actual studio building, and the layout of classes is pretty much just that everyone meets with the professor for like 20 minutes on their own, and then the lectures are with everyone. So it's definitely nice. I like the small classes and one-on-one with your professors and everything. But I do have those bigger lectures, and it's definitely harder to pay attention in lectures. When I'm sitting in the lectures, I like really notice a difference between like the one-on-ones versus sitting in a big lecture hall. So I like the small classes.
Carrie, I noticed that you replied to the questions ZW put in the chat. Do you want to share that with everyone in case the chat is not being viewed?
Yeah, ZW asked, if you submit your regular decision school applications before November 1st, will you hear back from them in December? And the answer is no. All regular decisions, like the schools come out on different days, but like for like one school, like UMD, all of the regular decisions will come out like beginning of February, or like for like Williams, all of regular decision will come out like March. It's not going to come out in December just because you submitted earlier.
Thank you, Carrie. If anybody has a question, we have the chat open. If there is anything you want to ask, just hop off mute and ask away.
Hi, everyone. This is Brian Raven. I have a question for you. I was wondering about fraternities and sororities and how that might work in your schools, how rushing works, if you've decided to, rush or not. I know some schools have it in the fall, some have it in the spring. So just curious about that. Thank you.
I can briefly answer this. Williams College doesn't have any fraternities or sororities. So they got rid of them back in the 50s, and then they got rid of them again in the 70s. But the fraternity houses are still there. So we have these things called TAPSY houses now. So like affinity houses, basically. So the Black Student Union has one, the Queer Student Union. So they've taken over these old fraternity houses, but we don't have any fraternities or sororities.
Yeah, at Pratt, we have like Greek life. I think the sorority has like 4 girls in it. So, and there's no houses or anything, so I don't know a lot about that either.
At Georgetown University, frats and sororities just look very, very different. We have like AE Pi, SAE, we have Kappa Kappa Gamma. But since we're a Catholic school, all of the sororities and frats are unofficial. So we don't have frat or sorority houses like the big state schools like UMD or UVA would. They just dorm like close to each other, or they rent out a townhouse and they'll host events. And I've heard that it's a really great way to meet people, but it's just not a big thing at Georgetown. And I think the social scene will be very different depending on what college you go to. Like I know most colleges down south, the Greek life is like the biggest way to meet people, but that's not the case at my school or Dylan or Charlotte's school.
Thank you for that.
Follow up to you if I can. So those affinity houses, is that places where students can stay, or they just become places where students like meet and do their work?
So these are actual houses. So if you want to be in the Black Student Union house, you just tell the Black Student Union for the next year, they can choose who lives in the house. So each of the houses has roughly about 35 rooms, and they invite you to join the house. So actually for next year, I'm creating my own house with another student. It's going to be the International Diplomacy and Global Finance House. So our house is going to be hosting students that are like-minded in that regard. And we're going to be having weekly guest speakers, things of that regard.
Dylan, you would love my major. 'Cause I'm a diplomacy major. That's really nice.
Thank you very much for that reply. There is a comment and question in the chat. I definitely cannot answer this one, so I'll throw it over to panelists to see if you can.
Yeah, so I was actually one of these seniors last year. I heard back from Georgetown, and that's because Georgetown is restrictive early action. And a lot of people were confused, and they asked me if I'd ED there because I got to hear back so early. And it's like Harvard, MIT, I think like Caltech, Georgetown, like so many schools. And like Northeastern, I think you can apply there early, and as long as you don't apply to any other early school, they'll let you hear back early, but that doesn't mean you can't keep on applying to other schools.
Do y'all feel that you've been well prepared? Like, how would you compare the academic, level of intensity from Wootton class at AP classes to college?
Yeah, I'd say it was definitely an adjustment. I wouldn't say it was easy in any regard. I would say college classes are definitely more difficult just because, at least at Williams, it's more reading and it's more writing, stuff that we didn't have to do much at Wootton, especially the reading aspect. It's for some of my classes, we have to read a whole book every week. I mean, granted, these are just about 200-300 page books, but still we have to read one for the class every week. And I don't think Wootton prepared us in that regard too well as for the writing aspect, but in all other aspects, I think Wootton was a very competitive school. And so that competitive atmosphere, I think, sets Wootton kids apart in college because, some students didn't come from very competitive schools. So we already have that mentality edge over other students within the school.
I would say for me, it was a hard adjustment, not because Wootton didn't prepare me well, but just what I was doing in college was so different from what I did at Wootton. So it was like I'm an architecture major. for people that weren't here earlier. And, it's a lot of like, you get critiqued, you have to redo things, like you're spending hours and hours working on things, and like, it's just so much more design based. So it was I was putting in a lot more hours, and I wasn't like taking tests and getting that immediate like satisfaction of getting A's and stuff. Cause I also still have not received any grades because we only get a final grade at the very end of the course. So it's just because it's a very different environment was what's hard for me. So I would say that it really depends on where you're going, because I know that Wootton prepares you really well for like a state school environment probably, but for Carrie, Dylan, and I, where it's a little more like liberal arts or that kind of based, it's more that the curriculum is an adjustment. But I would still say that Wootton prepared me well for like in a lot of other ways.
It's harder to get good grades in college. And at Wootton, I feel like everyone did get like good grades. Like it was very common to have like all A's and all B's, but college isn't like that. I know at Georgetown, there's like a 30%, less than 30% of the class can get an A rule. So that's something that I wasn't expecting, like jump from high school to college. And like besides the workload, I think like Wootton's competitive atmosphere, like going back to what Dylan was saying, like prepares you really, really well. Like there's a reason why like so many kids from Wootton like get into good schools every year, and it's because like we get like all the good like AP classes offered. Like there's so many great clubs to join, and like there's so many like great tutors in the area, but also just because like the teachers and the students, there's kind of just like a culture of like wanting to get into these good colleges and like wanting to get good grades. And like I think that's where like Wootton stands out from like so many other schools.
So panelists, let's try this one on for size. It's been on my mind a bit tonight. You have now gone from a very structured environment in high school, in which everyone's kind of doing the same thing on repeat day in and day out, 7 periods a day, to a much less structured environment in your undergrad experience. How have you adjusted to that? And what were the big surprises in having so much more kind of freedom and not spending all of your time just like in the academic classroom?
For me, it felt very weird not having like the 8 to 3 like school day. Like some of my classes started at like 5. I had like a recitation, so like an extra like boost to your lecture class at from 7 to 8 on Thursdays. And I just wasn't used to like not having classes in the morning, like having so many classes in the later half of my day, and having to having to like section out that time in the morning to like not just sleep in, but like to do my homework. So I think in that sense, like college classes will be like all over the place, like different places at different times, just like making sure you know like how to plan out your day and section it out. Because in high school, it's like a very rigid schedule. Like you eat lunch from like 11:30 to 12:15. Like you go home at 3 and you do all your extracurriculars and homework from like 3 to 12, and you don't do homework in the morning. Like in college, no one tells you what to do, so you kind of have to figure that out for yourself. But I thought it was nice having classes only in the afternoon.
Yeah, I definitely liked having more of a free schedule, but you do, it's not like having classes in the afternoon means you get to sleep in and stuff. It's like, I tried to like maintain a routine where like, okay, I'm waking up like by 9 every day and going and starting my work. And it was also nice at Pratt because we have in the architecture school, everyone has their own desk in the architecture building. So it'd be like, okay, I'm going to go to my desk there at this time and work all the way up until like lunch. And yeah, I think it's important to like schedule out your day and format it. But it's still nice to have that freedom. And the same thing with Carrie. Like I had days where my classes were only started at like 2 or 3. But I found that I was like working pretty much all the time in the mornings and stuff. So it didn't really feel like that different from the schedule in high school, but it's still nice to have the freedom. You just have to plan it out.
I tried to keep it as close as I could to high school, at least for the first semester. So I had an 8:30 class every day of the week. So I'd try to get up early regardless. It was the Saturday, Sundays that, it's sleeping a little, maybe sleep till 9. And then next semester, though, I have classes again, but this next semester I signed up for 8 a.m. classes. So I'm still getting up early for them. But I don't know how prepared I am for the 8 a.m.s, but the 8:30s weren't too bad. And then the good thing is, I think Wootton prepares you because a lot of students still do extracurriculars and their classes. So that's that same kind of blend. So students, in college or in high school, I started to have a calendar. And so I continued that calendar usage in college. And so you were still able to stay on top of everything, even though your classes were spread out. But I was lucky. I didn't have any night classes this semester. I don't know how I could have done those without falling asleep. I feel bad for you guys when classes in the afternoons.
Just to impart some final thoughts, if there were, anything when you think through the college experience, or, take on this question, if there's one thing that you would really want someone to know now that you have been through this process of applying and then transitioning to your first year in undergrad, what advice would you provide?
Yeah, some of the pieces of advice I would like to part is that enjoy the summer after your senior year as much as possible, because that summer, there really isn't much you have to do important wise for applications and things like that. Junior summer is important because you put the stuff on your college application, but senior summer, you can just have fun. The summer after your senior year, I would recommend getting a job or something of the sort. You save up some walking around money for during college. And then I'd also suggest looking into smaller schools. A lot of Wooten students apply to schools like UMD, things like that. But smaller schools like the schools us three that go to are great in that regard because you build these deep connections because you see the same students day in and day out. I never thought I'd go to a small school, but I've been living life. I've been enjoying it a lot. Something else good is that, like at Williams, we're all singles. So all our dorms are singles except for a select few. So you get that regard. I'm not sure. I don't think Carrie and Charlotte's are singles because they're in the city. But since we're in a very rural area, we're all in single rooms. So definitely, go out of your comfort zone a little and look into these small schools.
I think my biggest piece of advice would be for your application, like colleges are looking at so many applicants, and like the competition is getting very, very intense like these past years. And I feel like one piece of advice that I really stuck with and that really did pay off is like make your application like the most unique to yourself that it can be. Like if you are looking, like even when you're putting down like an activity, like a 100-character description of like an activity that you're doing, like if anyone else can like write that sentence, then it's probably not unique enough, or like creative enough. Like make sure that like every sentence you're writing, whether it's in like your resume section, in like your small essays or even your Common App essay, like make it like very, very like personal to you, and show the college like what, instead of talking about like what that college can provide for you, like talk about what you can provide for that college, because that's what they want to know.
I would say my biggest piece of advice is just like that this time we're in right now can be really stressful, like when you're getting decisions back and everything, or even for juniors who are starting to think about it. But it is really competitive, and even in the environment that Wootton has, like, everyone knows like, oh, today this decision is coming out and stuff, and everyone will be talking about it, and just try not to like get wrapped up in that too much, because like you're going to end up at like the place that's right for you, and if you don't, then you can figure it out. And yeah, just not like comparing yourself to other people, or like wondering why you didn't get in there and someone else did. Like it can be really stressful. So just like try to relax, and like everything will work out.
All right, panelists. Well, thank you very, very much for imparting all of the things that you've learned and giving some advice to students and responding to the questions. We very much appreciate it. Last call, just in case there's a burning question out there that didn't get to be asked yet.
I have one question.
Perfect.
This is mostly for Carrie and Charlotte, but when you were deciding what school to go to, how did you block out like everyone else's opinions, and how'd you choose to go where you wanted to go rather than from the pressure of others?
I would say that's definitely something that's hard to do. But for me, um like the pressure of everyone else, I didn't really let it get to me that much because I knew what I wanted to do, and I like knew what I wanted really clearly. And it's just important to know that like no one else knows what you want, like, and also to not really get wrapped up in like this school everyone views as better than this school, but I really like this school. Like you know what's best for you, and like every school has different pluses and minuses. So you just need to like weigh them out, and every single person is going to have different things that they want, and you're the only person that knows what you want. So everyone else that is like thinking, well, that's a better school, but it might not be for you. So that's the most important thing to think about.
Yeah, everything Charlotte's saying is absolutely true. There are different factors to consider, like there's location, there's money, there's the atmosphere, there's city versus rural versus suburban, there's size. And I think like the school that you end up choosing, it really boils down to like a culmination of these factors, and also like how important like a certain factor is to you. Like, is your major the most important thing, or is it the size of the school? Is it like the distance away from home? Like all these factors are like very like personal factors that like other people are gonna like project their own like opinions based on like probably like rankings or like what they've heard about the school. But that doesn't really matter. What matters most is like the factors, and like think about like what is most important to you. Like is it like a private school that's most important? Is like the size of the school? Because you're gonna get into like hope you're gonna get into like so many different schools, and you're gonna have trouble like picking out one. And you should think about like what's most important to you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, well, thank you again for all of those questions to students and guests that were with us. To the panelists, we appreciate your time. Thank you for coming back to Wootton. It's great to hear about your experience. And I think I speak for everybody who is joined as a guest. We wish you all kinds of success. And that 4 years of college undergrad goes by really quickly. So don't forget to enjoy all of the great things and learn so much while you're there. It's a wonderful time to be an undergrad. So thanks so much for your time. And with that, I think we will conclude room 3. Thanks so much, everybody.